for the scope of 4 o'clock. Thank you. That's 2 minutes slow. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 4 o'clock. This is tax increment reinvestment zone number 4. Thank you for your attendance. Be aware that this meeting is live stream and that we will have some guests joining us. Do we have any requests for public comments?
Okay.
Will be there being none, first order of business will be the consideration of an action on the minutes of December 19, 2022. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through those. If so, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes. I'll make that motion. Motion by Matt Shepherd. Thank you, Matt. Second by Bridget. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 4, consideration of an action on authorization of a budget amendment in the amount of $109,560 for a contract with Stantec Consulting Services for the Track 5 Economic and Urban Design Study. Jessica Hubble will be leading us through this presentation. Welcome, Jessica. Oh, point of privilege. We have a new member. I should have introduced William. You all hopefully know William. This is William's first meeting to join us.
Yeah.
And he's an appointment as a member of City Council of, of the mayor and replacing Carol. So Carol has moved to TIRZ 3, I believe. Welcome, William.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, Jessica, to interrupt. The floor is yours now.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming today for our special meeting. I don't know if you guys have ever had one of these, but exciting news. We've got some stuff happening. So I appreciate y'all's flexibility and time coming in here today. So just a little background, last fall, in preparation for the city council retreat, staff was asked to focus on what we call catalyst sites within our city, which are areas that include vacant land that have been identified as areas within our city that can accommodate development, redevelopment, and so they're called catalyst sites for development. So the areas that we're focused on were areas that we actually have investment in. So we looked at the Century Unit, Imperial, and then Track 5. So during this time, staff committed to Stantec in a preliminary market and feasibility study, which we call phase 1, where Stantec was asked to propose a mix of uses that were market driven, solely market driven. So this is an example of what Stantec produced in that phase 1 study, which was expedited, I will say. Stantec was provided background information on the comprehensive plan, the land use plan, along with some of the city's vision for the site. Stantec did preliminary research and created this inspiration map based on the current market demands, creating an idea of a new vision. So the goal was to get a snapshot of the current catalyst site, where we are now in our life cycle as a city. I'm sure many of you have heard we do not have a lot of developable land left. We're down to like 2 to 3%. So we want to make sure that everything that is developed moving forward is highest and best use. And it's really what makes sense for our city moving forward in the next 10, 20, 30 decades. So this is an example of what they came up with. So where the market is now versus where it was 20 years ago. So with the recent ownership changes within Track 5, as many of you all know, staff thought it was really necessary to dive deeper into that Stantec work. So we did take this to the Economic Development Committee to kind of run it through them to get their feedback on, which they did agree. As you guys, again, probably recall, in the early 2000s, when this was all owned by Newland, there was a vision that was outlined with a hotel and retail and office. And with the ownership changes, it just no longer makes sense, right? You got MD Anderson owning everything in the dark pink. Newland still owns that top 8 acres, and then the city owns the parking lot and Smart Financial Center. And then down at the bottom, you got 50 acres that was previously owned by Floor and is now owned by Zanani Group. So this study would include the 50 acres for Floor, the city's property, and that top 8 acres. And so what this study would do, it would build on the previous market and feasibility study and create a more vision specific and market supportable development concept for that study area, and then bringing in a little bit of the community engagement. So included in the scope, like I said, is the areas that you see here. While MD Anderson, follows their own regulations and guidelines, we have had conversations with them about our desire to do this study. And so they did commit that if so, they would stay involved in the conversations. They want to see the outcome. They want to make sure that they're a part of this development and it don't look like kind of their own development. So for phase 2, we're recommending for approval, it'd be an economic and urban design study. So the elements of this phase would be identifying priorities and opportunities to encourage appropriate development, improve underutilized spaces, and to activate civic assets to their highest and best use. It would identify best practices to continue to make Track 5 a more livable, walkable, thriving destination. There was a lot of money put into the Smart Financial Center, so we want to make sure that the area around it is built with that in mind and everything connects and people have things to do before and after it goes. Drive that investment opportunity to Track 5 to maximize the return on public and private investment, and then integrate and synchronize the aesthetics and amenities of both public and private investments in Track 5. So we want it all to make look like it's all supposed to be together, right? And build off of each other and kind of share the same look if at all possible. So some of the services that I want to highlight out that are kind of most important. So location specific market context analysis. So this would build on the previously completed market feasibility assessment and complete a location specific market context analysis. This would allow us to better understand performance of development types, and the analysis would yield a more accurate estimate of rents, which is the key metric for the value side of the pro forma. So it's really important to know what that's going to say to determine the financial feasibility of this. So the factors considered are industry trends among similar major use groups, activities and undertakings in the competitive markets, the capacity of this area to accommodate a financially sound critical mass of product types, like how much can be built here and actually be financially stable, impacts from proposed and existing generators, and then again, the community's potential to successfully position itself for investment. How are we going to shape up against all the competition that's building in and around Sugar Land? So then another service to highlight is the Track 5 Catalyst Site redevelopment concepts. This map is provided on the back side of your agenda, but the scale got kind of messed up, so I do apologize. But the site would be divided into 5 zones. Each zone would be analyzed for its financial feasibility from a private sector developer's perspective. And that would be accompanied by a set of program recommendations, including a land use and product mix, image and theme, target market and user groups, supporting infrastructure, and then other amenities. These concepts would then be vetted through city staff to confirm that it's aligning with the community's intentions. If we need to adjust something, it's not what we're looking for. We kind of have some back and forth dialogue then. And some deliverables that we would get from this are plan view renderings, perspective visualizations, financial gap analysis, and then the fiscal impact analysis for all 5 subzones. Because even though, they're all kind of their own area, but they need to all work together, but all 5 are going to have different elements that need to make sense to this all holistically work together. So looking at them in subzones will help us have a better a look into those specifically. So the financial analysis. So this research will provide a basis for analyzing the proposed development type from a financial perspective. This will provide a high-level pro forma model to estimate how the proposed development projects will pencil out from a financial perspective. There's a lot of things that we want to see and residents want to see is housing and retail and different types of amenities, but if they don't make financial sense, what's the likelihood we're going to get them? So this will give us a real good idea of what financially makes sense in this development and what type of uses the market is saying can be accommodated here. And so what this will yield to, which is really important, is an estimated financial gap. So this would be an estimate of what the public sector support might be to require the specific development. So that could be infrastructure support, like from TIRZ 4 with the project plan. That could be support from type A and type B funds on the economic development side. Then it'll show us like where is that gap when it comes to what the development could be versus what is that missing piece. So the deliverables would be summaries of findings and then the pro formas for each 5 zones to include that estimated financial gap. And then the fiscal impact analysis. So this would use the program developed in task 1.4 with the redevelopment concepts. So this would estimate the financial impact of the new development. So this would be the revenues that the city receives through property and sales tax, and then the costs associated with providing municipal services to the new development. So if we spend all the time getting something developed, what is the actual financing that's going to come back to the city long term? And that would play into the TIRZ 4 financing and what that looks like in the future. And so a summary of fiscal impact of the proposed development would be delivered of the 5 subzones. So this is an estimated timeline. It's expected to take 10 to 12 weeks, and that's with some buffer. So if approved, we would kick off mid-May with a stakeholder interview between city and the landowners that are currently there. We talked with all of them about getting their participation in this and making sure that they come along with us so we get the best possible development at the end. Week 3 is important because that's where we would bring in a resident focus group. This would consist of about 6 to 8 residents. They would actually see some of the market analysis that's been done. We would talk through opportunities and the strengths. We would have some visuals to show them to try to really have some back and forth dialogue of why we're doing what we're doing, what they like, what they don't like, and then kind of continue through there. Week 4 through 7-ish, we would have a halfway check-in, wrap up some of the analysis work. Week 8, we would expect a presentation to the city for us to provide comments back, and they can make edits as needed. And then once it's gone through the city vetting, we would bring back that resident focus group and kind of show them that final products and see what their feedback is, and hopefully get buy-in and get them excited about what the future could potentially be. And then week 10 through 12, again, there's some buffer there. It would wrap up final deliverables. So we'd be looking to end late July to early August. So here's a breakdown of the fees. It's pretty straightforward. It's a fixed rate of $99,600. Here is a snapshot of the budget amendment. So we are requesting that this is pulled from the ending fund balance. We have a very healthy ending fund balance here in this TIRZ. So you'll see the total amount is $109,560. So that's the $99,600 times 10%. That's for those travel, printing, kind of the after the fact charges that you may receive. And so you see it move to the support services, but our ending fund balance still remains at 7.3 million. So very healthy. So next step, if approved today, it would go to City Council on May 2nd for approval of the budget amendment contract. And then that's when you'd see us kick off the stakeholder meeting on May 22nd. And then we would plan to bring all the findings back to you at our September meeting. And with that, staff recommends consideration and action on authorization of a budget amendment pulling from the ending fund balance in the amount of $109,560 for a contract with Stantec Consulting Services for the Track 5 Economic and Urban Design Study. Just Mark Maldonado with Stantec should be on the call, so him and I are happy to address any questions that you may have.
Yeah. Any question?
I had several. One, I don't know anything about Stantec. Can I understand who they are?
Yes, I'll let Mark give you the info of all the data.
Yeah, howdy guys, and thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Mark Maldonado. I am a senior principal with Stantec, and we are, I am the landscape architecture and planning discipline lead for our Texas group. A little bit of Stantec. We are a top 10 global design firm, 27,000 employees worldwide. But specifically for this project, we are experienced with the city of Sugar Land and working with the planning department. We're actually completing phase 1 of the comprehensive plan study and working with the city's planning department and have done previous exercises with the Sugar Land EDC, as Jessica alluded to. One of the things that we bring to the table is in-house, we offer over 21 disciplines. So we're able to really bring robust projects to the table where they're not, fragmented, and they're really a multidisciplinary, cohesive presentation of ideas, thoughts, visions, goals, etc. And that's one thing that we've included in this project scope is bringing in economists, urban designers, architects, landscape architects to really have all these different puzzle pieces really work well together to be able to establish what that vision is, but more importantly, how can we translate a vision into an implementation plan or goals that can be brought into reality. But with that, I'll turn it over and see if there's any additional questions or specific questions that I could answer.
That's the first one. Okay. The second one, we had an executive summary of a plan previously that had a hotel and some other growth opportunities, but we also had it where there were certain certain areas are undesirable. Okay, since I know you've had conversations, can you be a little bit more open with us of what specific goals you have? I mean, are you still trying to do a hotel, a convention center?
It would be part of the
Well,
discussion.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I was gonna say, well, I wanna make sure that this comes across clear, like, it's not our goals per se. That's part of the process that we try to make sure that it's one, transparent, but two, brings all the different stakeholders to the table. In the initial plan that we did, we looked at areas for opportunity and gaps in the market that could help activate and turn some of these spaces into true catalyst sites. And the fact that we have some of these opportunities with some of the adjacent land uses, there were certain things that kind of, in our mind, made sense for low-hanging fruit, if you will, that could really kind of act as catalyst and work with some of the existing spaces that were there. That said, one thing that we didn't do last time that we are going to be doing this time is really involving some of the potential developers and bringing them to the table, working with the city and really seeing, okay, well, how can this be turned into a catalyst site? But it's not all set in stone either, and that's where there's that second part of the conversation that's going to be so important during this phase of work to see, well, if we say hotel, what really do we mean? Or is that just some kind of hospitality aspect of it? But I know, Stephen, you're on the line, but is there anything that you want to mention in regard to land use and programming that might be a little bit different this time around?
Yeah, Mark. And I don't know if my camera's working here. There we go. Nice to meet everybody. I think the biggest part of it is there's an overlay of experience, the best and highest land use, but that's also paired with the kind of financial gap, the pro forma end of things on this. So as Mark was saying, that we had kind of put forth kind of a vision, a concept for the site of what we thought would catalyze it. Now it's time to go in and refine it, scrutinize it, and see if that hospitality component is truly something that's going to pencil and sustain the site, because that's kind of at the forefront of what we're thinking with these solutions and concepts is what is going to sustain growth over that long period of time with the vision that aligns with Sugar Land as well.
If I may continue.
Yep.
It wasn't such a positive thing in the last study was multifamily. Is that still something we are trying not to do?
This will look at what the market is calling for. So it could be multifamily, it could be townhomes, it could be condos, it could be a variation of all. So this is really going to focus in on what the market is saying that we need. And then that's something that we will definitely speak with that resident group to really gauge, is it the number of multifamily? Is it the placement of multifamily? Like, what is it? Because I know previously the number was very shocking to people, what came forward a few years ago. Does that still need to happen today? We don't know, but that's part of the discussion. What is the market calling?
I understand now. I understand what you're doing. You're actually making a blank sheet, starting over again. Should I think that way?
I mean, somewhat. I mean, there's certain knowns, right? Like we know we need parking garages. We know we want it to be a mix of uses. We know we want it to be vertically integrated and walkable. But I think we know there has to be some form of residential here. But I think it's looking deeper into, now that we know MD Anderson owns 30 acres, they're going to have 1,000 employees there. Do we need all that multifamily? Maybe not.
Okay, may I pause there? You just said something I don't know.
MD Anderson?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's going to be a mega site, 500,000 square feet. So they're.
I don't read the newspapers, obviously, you know. that.
Sorry, we talked about it at one meeting. I'm sorry. So we've had minimal conversations with MD Anderson, but it's going to be there.
Could you go back to that slide and point that out again? Yes, so
Right.
he knows exactly what,
And I'm far enough away that I can't read it. Now
Yeah.
let's move on.
It just says sold.
so, yeah, and that's my question, Jessica.
Yes.
It looks like, okay, can you point out exactly which,
MD Anderson's owns all the dark pink.
all the dark pink? Okay, so like, there's lines between those two up there. Is that gonna be a road? Is that?
It's an existing road.
Okay, it's the existing road.
Yep.
Okay,
So
So,
we're looking at the dark blue and the light blue then.
The dark blue, light blue, and the city's existing, which is a parking lot, but that has been slated for future development. And that would ideally turn into a parking garage or multiple.
Okay, so now the solar area is empty.
yes,
Yes.
right, yeah, and that's
I
gonna,
thought you all knew that.
So it just
Yeah.
changes the mix, right?
Yeah.
It changes what's gonna be on that property
Right.
as opposed to what was there before.
yeah, it will be a regional care center.
Mhm.
Yes, so.
Floor property that we're talking about,
Oh,
that was sold
okay.
recently is the light blue, right? Right.
Yep, the floor, this was floor, now owned by Mr. Donati.
I appreciate your patience to bring
You're
this
fine.
director up to speed, you know,
That's
so
why I'm here.
if something happened to me, thank you all. I'm with you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I have a few questions, because our exhibit is cut off, and what I printed out from my computer was this one, similar to you have up there. So is the Newland track included in this study,
The top, yes.
the northern track?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
that 8 acres
Yes,
is, okay. And how's the city gonna implement this, I guess? Is it going to be? Because now we're talking about public land and private land. I mean, how are we gonna compete with, where does that hotel go? Now you're competing with free land, which is a lot easier to get a deal done than, and I'm not saying they're not paying for the land. Are y'all land leasing? And there's a reason, because we're a TIRZ and we get money through tax, tax revenue, so.
Well, the initial reason for the hotel here, the state offered, I wouldn't say a deal, but an incentive that if it was city-owned land and you built a hotel conference center, there were certain, perks you got back. Yes, I mean, there's competition all around us, and I think that's another driver of this study is that we have minimal land left. People are developing all around us. Our land is very high value. So what is gonna make somebody come and develop here versus go to Richmond or Rosenberg or Stafford, wherever, right? And so we understand that there's gonna be a financial gap that the city is gonna have to come in and fill, whether that's through infrastructure, through the TIRZ, which is why it was set up, or again, the type B funds that economic development has. That's why I think this is so important for us to really understand what the market is driving, because, a lot of people have certain wishes that they want, or, grocery stores or housing or, certain amenities. And if it's not feasible here for whatever reason, we want to be able to have those conversations very honestly and truthfully with our residents so they understand what to be expected, because we can't make people come here, right? But what we can do is try to create, the type of zoning that will enable the development we want to see, the financial packages that might be enticing or enticing of people, but also using the marketability of, you've got U of H right across the street, you've got MD Anderson, a huge major employer, you've got a beautiful performing arts center. I mean, it has its own perks, but there's competition all around us. And so we're just trying to make sure that we go after what really makes sense for this area so that it is successful long term.
Since we have our college here, okay. We have a wonderful University of Houston campus right next to it. I assume the study will be using that as a tool for recruiting. They are growing, and there's a lot of people want to see grow bigger. Is there any part of this study that's going to integrate what their path of growth is alongside this? So we know that we have synergy.
Mark, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so in a broader context, yes, but not specifically. So the focus area is exactly what's on the screen right now. It's those zones that are outlined in red. Now, during the phase 1 of the scope of work, we did look at the University of Houston campus master plan, and we looked at like some population growth and just how they have their future land, at least spatially, master planned at this point. That said, we can only control what we can control. So we were looking at different types of relationship, different land uses where both would be beneficial for a win-win, but in a way also using them to help catalyze this site, specifically zone 3, zone 4, but have that synergized relationship and symbiotic relationship of land uses with either housing or a corporate campus or some kind of scientific institution of some sort. So we were kind of looking at different land uses and programs that again would be beneficial, but more importantly, really activate these sites and really turn them into a catalyst.
Okay, because I'm gonna refer back to you. Are you still trying to get students on campus, residential campus?
Eventually, right now, we have 40 acres for the industry partnership zone right off 59. Phase one would be more of an industry partner. Thank you. Phase one would be more of an industry partner that would develop on the property for internships, externships, and get that established. Phase two would include housing at some point.
Okay, because I look at both right and left here, you notice that I'm actually a director acting as a facilitator now, okay? Is because I think it's really important that your study does include the university, because there is student housing here. Most of the student housing today is private. They're private developers that come in. If we do have student housing there, you're gonna have something in that area, okay? So I would just want to make sure in your study that the university is well interviewed on making sure that their master plan is documented in your report. So if there is any synergy between the two of you, that we can, if we're going to spend any money, is there something we can do that would help Sugar Land, the county, and the university? Okay, because we look at you all, we're all partners. So I'd like to have your study make sure it includes their master plan. If that means making your proposal a little less because we're asking you to do that, or is a little more because we're asking you to do that, okay? But I think it's real important we look at our TIRZ as one unit and not break it apart, because we could lose something by doing that. We could lose something on the roadside. Also, we got traffic we don't understand. Or if we're going to be out spending money on traffic and sidewalks and cross paths and bridges. Because one of the things that I've kind of looked at was if you grow that university, and somehow or another we need a bridge across university to allow pedestrian traffic to move. And you see, all of us have visions, okay? And if that pedestrian bridge needs to be created by the TIRZ, then maybe something should be considered there for being able to move back and forth. Because how large is your population now?
Right now, we're about 5,000 students, but we're going to grow by 2,000 the next 2 years.
7,000 students right there. So if you're trying to make it grow, how do we make the students are becoming older, right? What's your average age of a student?
26.
26. $26,000 a year. Not a lot but it's helpful. But anything we can do to help them grow, and then also anything that helps them move their population over into what you're trying to do. I'm just trying to make sure that we look at the whole package.
No, I understand. U of H, I mean, they're definitely a stakeholder when it comes to what we're doing here. They're right across the street. We know that's where a lot of the people are now and or will be in the future. So those numbers are definitely factored in when you're looking at, this entire area for sure.
Please do. I just, because of parking garages, for both of you and everything. I know you know what you're doing. I just want to make sure I understand what you're trying to do.
I appreciate your question. I want you to feel comfortable with it. Yes.
So once we get the final deliverables from Stantec, what is the timeline for implementation in the recommendations? How far are we looking out?
Like, once this is done, when you mean on the
After
development side?
August,
You
the
mean on
plan,
You mean on the
yes.
development side? So it's a little tricky. So right now, the way it stands is this is still a PD, right? So if the developers, specifically Mr. Donati, who owned 4, he wanted to bring something forward as of now, he would have to go through the PD process. But ideally what this would be kind of an exhibit in his presentation, right? Or in his proposal, that it would align with what is being.
With the vision of the
What is
city.
feasibly sound here and what makes sense and what the market supports, and it aligns. It would still have to align with land use plan, it would still have to align with city's zoning. This is not a policy, right? This is not a governing document. This is a visioning, market analysis. So I do want to make that clear. There is, mixed use zoning being worked on right now and what that might look like in the future. So if that were to be in place at the time, then that could be something that could potentially be considered here, but it would still have to align nonetheless.
Okay.
But as of now, they would follow the same PD process, but ideally this would hopefully expedite that because it would match, it would align, it would move through.
Okay.
They're gonna be a part of this whole thing.
Some of us out. some
I
other people have
just want to make
questions.
sure you got one restriction here when you
Yes.
talk. Is the height, we have an airport.
Mhm.
Because I don't want these people to forget the height restriction.
Yes, for sure.
Oh, Terry was waiting for quite a while. Hi, Terry. Thank you. A couple of questions. One, from the historical perspective, I remember several years ago that, when Newland owned that property, that, there was discussion of what was going to be done with it, and they had kind of one vision, and yet the city had another vision. The city's priority was, now we want a parking garage first and blah, blah, blah. And I remember there was a lot of discussion going back and forth, but I recall that Newland was basically having to put out what all, that they wanted to do with their particular site. I don't remember the TIRZ basically funding any types of studies. So I guess what I'm asking, did we fund any studies? If not, why is it now that we're being asked to fund, the study for a different developer? Basically, we wouldn't fund for Newland, but why are we now funding for this developer and including the city and, whatever else?
I'm not sure about that. Devin, do you know any historical information there?
I don't know any historical information about the Newland discussions or negotiations before. We see this as an opportunity of bringing all the different stakeholders and groups to the table, whereas previously it was Newland and the city in terms of we own Smart Financial Center. We see this as the ability to bring all parties involved, including us, and involving some community engagement in the process in order to kind of collectively get to not only a new vision, because it's been a long time, but also what might be the public investment that we might need to make from TIRZ or 4A, 4B, knowing that things have changed. Things have changed in 20 years, so.
Well, no, this wasn't 20 years ago because.
Yeah. The original vision and the original setup of
Right,
TIRZ.
but I remember this is within the last, 3 to 5 years that we were discussing, as a TIRZ, this, Newland wants to do this, but the city wants them to do this, and there was a lot of, back and forth. My other, question on those same lines, I keep hearing discussions about, from Mark that, okay, well, our studies so far have seen this or that. I mean, so who's funding what all work has been done now? Is that included in this budget item? Or, I'm hearing all this work that's already been done.
The work that was done before was funded by SL4B.
Okay.
4B fund.
So everything that Mark's talking about that, well, we found such and such in our studies and that's already been funded by
Yes,
something
ma'am.
else.
And
Okay,
it looked at the Central Unit and Imperial, and Track 5 was a piece of it.
okay.
Thank you. So, first of all, I compliment the city for bringing this before us, and I think it's very appropriate that we TIRZ pay for this because obviously we are going to benefit the most in terms of future tax dollars for this area. A little history on Newland, when Newland owned the property, because I was on city council and actually a big part of the planning for Smart Financial and our property. Newland came forward with a very good plan. The problem is they wanted multifamily. Now, hopefully these folks here, Santec, will tell you through their research, because everything I've done on exploring this stuff is that you have to have multifamily to make anything like this successful, which is what just happened at Imperial. Mark II came forward and he needed X number of apartments to make it work. And yes, you have to have those apartments to make it work.
Right.
So Newland came forward with a mixed use of offices, apartments, retail, so on and so forth. And it got kiboshed only because the residents came out and did not want those apartments. So then the city said, well, we're not gonna have apartments there. Well, you can't just develop with office buildings. It's not going to work.
Right.
And so it fell apart. As a result, Newland sold the property to MD Anderson, which is wonderful, but we get no property tax from that.
Yeah,
So
right.
we've given up a huge amount of money by having MD Anderson there.
Mhm.
So going forward, what I'm hoping is that it will, the findings will be very strong that in order for this to be successful, we have to have multifamily there. I'm not talking about student housing because that's on the U of H side and these apartments I would think would be fairly expensive and most students can afford to live there. The other thing that we did a lot of work on, and we were down to where we actually interviewed developers to do the hotel conference center. And at that time, we did research and we found a convention center, excuse me. We found that it was very much needed as a certain size. And that would be successful. It would be a draw to bring people into that area. So I'm hoping that will also move forward and be part of this project.
And we've kept conversations with those groups and kind of kept them abreast on what's happening. So it's definitely something that will still be explored 100%.
Well, I'm excited about this plan, and I'm most interested in the process that will be used to get us to a point where if everyone can agree, we're looking at sustaining what we have in the city and making it better. If that's the goal, it's going to take a certain financial commitment, and it's really going to take some compromise on, because I think I was at the meeting where the residents were upset about what was happening there, because I think at that time I was on the school board and it came down to, well, where are all these students going to go to school? They did not want, at that time, Clements High School to have to deal with all the students that would come from apartment living. That was the bottom line. So I think we're at a point where if financially we're going to still have success in the city, we're going to have to figure out how to get the multifamily units in here. And the city has changed in the last 10 years. There are younger people living here who want to be and need to be in a multifamily situation. So given all of that, and we have teachers that could not afford to buy homes. They want an apartment and a nice apartment. So I think we hopefully in the process, we'll look at, yes, I know you're going to have some community input at two junctures, but I'm going to be curious about how you're going to select that community, because I think that needs to be pretty representative of the city, not necessarily of the adjacent neighborhoods, that area. Right. I think it's the city. Right.
That's great feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking ideally to be business owners, resident, I mean, in a mix. People that don't want it, people that do want it. I mean, we want the healthy debate, understandably. Because of the, push for redevelopment, community development and planning, we've had a lot of conversations with our community, especially around the Imperial project of we're in a different time now and there's going to be trade-offs, but if we all work together, we should be able to come to something that everybody can be happy with. But there will be trade-offs, and we just want to be open with those conversations, bring people along, and also show them the data that supports why we're recommending or developers are recommending to do something.
Okay.
So, if you have any recommendations, we're happy to.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I've always got something to say. It's gonna be very wise, Greg, pay attention. Hey, so stakeholders or landowners, how many, you say we're bringing them together? How many do we have here? 1, 2, 3?
So we've got Newland owns a little parcel on the top.
Okay,
Denani,
right.
and then MD Anderson, as much as they want to be. U of H, as much as they.
So as many as 4, including the city. And you said based on your I forget your calendar, your timeline, you're bringing in citizens.
I think that was 5, wasn't it?
6?
Wasn't it
Between
5
6 and
including?
8 for residents, ideally.
Okay, wasn't it 5 including, because you said Newland?
And then Smart Financial, we would have Smart Financials like Mary Becker, because they're the ones that are there.
Yeah,
existing.
okay.
Okay, so we've got 4 or 5 that are potentially going to come to the table. Tell us what their vision or ideas are. Meanwhile, hopefully, we're developing our own, using our residents to say, hey, great idea, this is what we want, blah, blah, blah. Stantec, if I may, I just did a little fast read on them. They're very successful. They had a great 2022, by the way. I just saw that. And probably because they're good work. So did we bid out this group Stantec or this project, or is Stantec a group that we've worked with historically? Or how did we end up with this successful group?
I'll let Devin speak to that. She started the phase one work.
So, when we went out for an RFP or RFQ for our comprehensive planning as like it was a step one. And so Stantec was the winner of that RFQ process. It was the same time that we were getting in preparation for the city council retreat. And so they were already up to speed with kind of like the direction we were going and the things that we were needing as part of that process. So we requested the scope of work for them for the phase one work that was presented as part of the council retreat. And so this is building off of that phase one.
So that's how they came about. And by the way, Mark, I'm William. I apologize for not identifying myself. I want to go back to something Mr. Shepherd said earlier. I cannot, and Mark, are you local? Are you from this local?
So I live in San Antonio, but I'm in Houston area about every 2 weeks.
Okay, the only reason I'm asking is Mr. Shepherd could not have stressed, well, maybe he could have been a little louder when he said it. But the University of Houston is just one of our, big brother, big sister, whatever you want to call them to our city. We're very dependent on their success and they are on ours. And so as I see your ideas that are going to come our way, I cannot think of anything more ideally inclusive than to have their dreams somehow written in the background so that puzzle all fits together. And to Mr. Shepherd's point, if it costs a little more, a little less to make sure that's included, I think that needs to be considered. I can't think of any worse plan than if we don't think about where the University of Houston is going in the not too distant future with their development, and we don't fit in that. That would absolutely be a nightmare of mine. But when we think about pedestrian traffic, I always think of something, and my wife will kill me for saying this, and Greg, you know my wife. If I were to put my wife there in that area, where would she go? With all these convention center ideas and just vaguely that we've talked about. I don't know if my wife would need to walk anywhere. She'd just get back in her car and leave. Hopefully she doesn't have to go to MD Anderson for a job or medical services. So it may end up being our students from University of Houston that are coming over. So all of these have to fit, or we're missing a great opportunity with U of H. So best of luck. I certainly am. We need this early Bridget, you know so much more about the history project's success and failures. But it seems like from my study, we didn't always lead with something like this. And what would happen is the developer would finally show up that day and present his or her plan, and we go, no, that didn't fit with our vision. Oh, we never shared our vision openly. And so this, I think, sounds like a great way to start.
That's what we're precisely trying to do.
Yeah, we need to.
Developers want to develop.
Great way to start.
Their right to do, but we want to do our best to make sure we're part of that conversation from the beginning and it all works together.
Thank you.
I guess this is Jennifer. It's positioning. Because I'm in the business, so I think this is, very smart and very proactive on the city's part. And like you mentioned, there's a very little land remaining. I know there's been a convention center project done, and that was, I don't know, I'm not gonna say shelved, but we did nothing with it. And so I think what's significant about this is that there is a follow through. Like, we're gonna have residents complain. And so we need a city council that's strong enough to say, this report, this study has been done so well and so extensive that we need our city council members to be on board. And I think that's critical in this whole process. And that's been kind of where things have ended sometimes as a result of, even though we spend a lot of money on these studies. So we want to be fiscally responsible to our TIRZ and our MUDs and everybody over here that we represent to ensure the success of that. And allowing those developers to really have some input too, because they're the ones really in touch with the market. They're the ones getting phone calls. Not that you want them to sell to anybody or anything, but I think it's going to be critical to listen a lot.
Understand.
And then the selling point to the city council. So.
And just to reiterate, this was when we first. I don't want to say thought of this, but came to it, we took it to the economic development committee, to the council members, so they knew that we were thinking this way to get their buy-in and feedback. And then part of this study will be Stantec interviewing developers in our competitive markets to hear what their feedback is. Okay, so yes, ma'am.
Well, just a note to compliment our city council. So this past time with Imperial, very proud that 5 of our council members voted for it, and they had the courage, even though they did have a lot of backlash from the community. What's interesting, though, very interesting, something to keep in mind, Mr. Ferguson, when you have to make this decision again. When you looked at where people came from to speak against Imperial, only 40% of those folks were from the area around Imperial. 60% were from other parts of the city. Very interesting. Just
And
a
may I add to that?
observation.
A fact that I learned, 3 of the lead opposition to that, not to digress to that, but it all plays out in a lack of information or extra information. 3 of the lead forces in opposition, they don't even live in Sugar Land. So these are things that I have to discover as we take the heat for good plans or poorly presented plans. I mean, council, we're in. I mean, we certainly love the city. And when I see things moving in this direction, in this way, it's easy for me to get behind a great idea that's been studied out through our community. I absolutely love this.
Any other questions for Jessica or Mark or Stantec Group?
I do have a question. As far as, so as you were mentioning, throughout the process, okay, when you have your final data, you take it back to developers and stuff. I guess, devil's advocate, what if that's not what the developers wanted to do, or they have a different vision or whatever? How's that gonna be handled?
Mark, you can chime in, but I'll start. They're gonna be involved from the very beginning. So the very first meeting, we'll have them saying their must-haves, their, high wishes, what they envision. They'll be a part of the halfway check-in. They'll be a part of all of this. Ideally, that will not happen, but there will be things that the developers want that we may not believe or the data may not show that it's the best possible use. There's gonna have to be trade-offs, there's gonna have to be compromise, because we don't want to get to a point that we're deadlocked and then there's no movement. So I think we all have to understand there will be some trade-offs, but our hope is we've had many conversations with the landowners currently about this and the intention behind it, and they will be involved from the beginning. So we're really going to try to have those open conversations ahead of time so we do not get to that point. I mean, it's in everyone's best interest to try to do this together to move this forward. So our hope is that will happen. Mark, did you want to add anything else?
No, I think, you hit the nail right on the head. So oftentimes these plans don't work. It's because of, you don't have the right people sitting at the table, but then there is not a unified vision. So that's why this process is a little bit more unique. It's that that's where we're starting, is to bring the developers to the table to say, okay, what is your vision? What is your goals? Also, what does your performance look like, to see, is it real? Is it something that's tangible that we can say, okay, well, let's marry that idea that's very developer like focused and very development heavy, and then mix that with what are the surrounding land uses? What does the public realm look like? And how do these things work together? Because it can't be siloed. Like catalyst spaces and activated spaces are not siloed. Like they work with context, and they're multiple puzzle pieces that kind of fit together and just blossom. So having that initial conversation with the developers, then kind of coming back with the idea saying, this is what we heard, this is what we saw from our market analysis feasibility studies. Now, this is kind of that vision that comes to life. And it should be pretty close, that works for them, but also works for the EDC and the city and the TIRZ. Now, with that said, that's not, it can't just stop there. I mean, that's really kind of the beginning of a roadmap, or, the implementation phase has to happen at that point. But at least now you have a unified vision and something that is graphically shown to say, this is kind of what we aspire that place to be. This is kind of the materials that we want. These are the densities that we're really thinking. And we've all kind of already vetted this, and we've had the right people at the table. And at that point, you use it as a negotiation tool. And you want to make sure that if one developer falls through, that you use that with the next developer to say, hey, this is a vision, you know, and we're all on the same page here. But you keep using that document to kind of get you closer to that finish line in a way.
The financial side's really important at this too, like what is that gap? And if the city's gonna come in and fill a gap, it needs to be a compelling project and we all need to be on the same page.
May I conclude? I think two of us directors have said we're supportive. Not going to speak for you, sir. But we really do want to see the master plan of the university involved in this setting. So I would like to have that. That's my conclusion on this. I like to see it and explain why. I think they're exploding. I think you're getting ready to explode. And I think the university has to look at both sides of the road to not allow themselves to get locked up into only one side. So I was really trying to focus that the university is such an importance to the Sugar Land, but also the Fort Bend County, that we make sure that we give them room to grow.
Understood. So I don't know if the cost will increase by adding that. So is there a way for us to still take action, include U of H if the costs increase? We can move forward looking at our legal.
I have a question. I think Mark said he was already taking that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that,
Can we confirm that?
Mark, can you comment on that?
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
I think we just need clarification, Mark. Y'all looked at UH's master plan.
We
when you
did.
did the phase one work and you included that information as part of your recommendations in the phase one. And so
Right.
that will be included as part of this phase two as well. We're not going to keep it in a silo and not consider what UH's overall master planning plans are as well.
Right. So with that, we didn't do any graphic master planning exercises with the University of Houston, like on their property. We basically took published documents or their master plan and said, okay, this is how they're going to grow. Now, what land uses, what programs that make sense, in what, especially where are those located, where it would be that symbiotic relationship. So that's what we did already in phase one, and we're going to keep doing that as we kind of keep refining and tweaking into phase two. The only difference that we didn't do previously that I do welcome that we do, and we can, I mean, it would be included in the overall prize that you guys have seen today, would be to invite them to the table with the stakeholders, you know, that first week to kind of get an understanding. And I think that would be in everybody's benefit, you know, that they get an understanding of what their plans are and how they're going to grow and where they're really focusing their growth initiatives, you know, so that the developers, MD Anderson, Newland, the city, like they're all understanding kind of where the growth is going to happen and how is that going to affect this particular parcel, you know, or parcels. So that would be the only difference that I would say would be a key element to the success of this project, but also to having that relationship be positive in the delivery of this overall program and design.
Hey, this is Elizabeth Huff here, Director of Economic Development. I don't know if Jay is still there. I can't see the room that well, but I want to make sure that. Okay. Jay, do you want to speak up about y'all's plans to do y'all are already in the process of doing a master plan. You've got one, but y'all are working on the industrial partnerships. And I don't think we have the ability we can encompass all of your information, but we can't tell you what to do on y'all's site. Y'all are already in the process of determining that, correct?
I think as long, I think as long as, you know, and I appreciate the support very, very much. As long as we're part of the conversation and we can share our information and kind of where our growth projections are. I mean, really right off the top of my head, I know, you know, with our phase one, our student needs, we need a living room before we need a bedroom. And that's going to be our, you know, in terms of a student union or like a student center, that's our bigger priority by the next 5 years. But really looking at a 5 to 10 year growth plan, I think if we can do this together, again, I don't want to slow down the conversations at all. But I think just maybe in these discussions with week one, to have, maybe myself or CFO involved in this conversation, I think that we'll check all the boxes off and we can move forward.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make the motion that we authorize a budget amendment in the amount of $109,560 for a contract with Santec Consulting Services, Inc. for the Track 5 Economic and Urban Design Study.
Thank you. I have a motion made by Bridget Young. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second from Cynthia. All in favor of the above motion? Raise your right hand. Any opposed? Motion's passed. Any further items for discussion? Questions? We've run over time on my schedule.
I do, so what I'm hearing is that we will not have a meeting in the summer, that our next meeting will be probably September-ish.
Is that right, Jessica?
I'll have to confirm that. I
Okay.
think there might be certain things you still need to come see us again for.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
We'll be subject to a special meeting, sounds like.
okay.
Yeah, special meetings going out.
Thanks again for your participation, your wisdom, much appreciated. We are anxious to get moving. Thanks again. I will accept the motion to adjourn.
That I will do.
Matthew makes a motion. I need a second.
I second it.
Thank you, William. All in favor?
Aye.
I-
Pass unanimously. Meeting's adjourned at 4:59. Barely.
We get a copy of this report, or we'll get a report on the report.
Yes.
Yeah, because I haven't seen the first report. That may have been a little helpful before we saw this.
I don't think we paid for